I have the great pleasure of introducing Robbie Kellman Baxter to the Leadership Caffeine podcast today. Robbie, it is so great to have you here, and I'm so excited. I just loved reading your new book, The Forever Transaction, How to Build a Subscription Model So Compelling Your Customers Will Never Want to Leave. That's one of my favorite titles in a long time.
Thanks. I'm glad you like it, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, as I was reading through it, I found myself having a tug of war in my brain. This happens a lot, by the way, kind of my former corporate self and my solopreneur self. And so I found myself wondering, because I think it's great. The concepts are fabulous for everyone. Who's really your intended audience here? Is there kind of a primary target you would hope this would land on?
I actually really want it to be for anybody who's trying to build long-term relationships with the people they serve. Okay. And so I structured the book, part one is really for people just getting started. And by the time you get to part three, it's really, you've gone through some very sophisticated case studies of large organizations transitioning from a more transactional business model to more of a relational business model. Mm-hmm. So I actually, it actually has a pretty wide net. What I was trying to do was provide all of my experience and learning in, a £1 package so that, you can buy the book, but you can also just get it at the library, and hopefully it helps people who, I can't help through my consulting practice.
Well, I think that people are going to buy the book, and they'll do what I did with it, was that they'll put Post-its all over, they'll dog-ear it, and they'll be referencing it, in part. So here's the corporate self coming out. This is an incredible follow-on, and this dates me, but to a strategy book that I still love and still think is relevant today, and that's The Discipline of Market Leaders, which is circa the 90s, I think, and Triesi and Wiersma, and one of the disciplines was customer intimacy. And this struck me as kind of this new, chapter that's missing from their book on customer intimacy. So I loved it for that. I mean, it's a great book. It's also a great book on leading change in an organization.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be kind of included in that group of topics and books. The customer intimacy is core. One of the issues that I see, everybody wants to do subscriptions right now. Everybody wants to have a membership, wrap a membership around their subject matter expertise, slap a subscription price on their existing products and services. And what a lot of organizations neglect is that customer intimacy, that without that intimacy, without knowing who you're serving, and without having earned their trust, the membership model, the subscription pricing is not going to work.
I love that. I need to have you join me on my next conversation with my marketing team, because they've been all over me as the solopreneur to say, all right, you need a membership site and a membership system because it will boost revenue. And my pushback, I'm kind of a fan of boosting revenue. I mean, don't get me wrong on that. But my pushback was,
aren't we all?
Seems like there needs to be a deeper reason for this. There's got to be a customer at the center of this. And oh, by the way, membership implies ongoing relationship, and I have to be able to give value in that ongoing relationship. So I've kind of paused on how to figure out how to do that for myself.
Yeah, I give credit to your marketing team. It is and can be a great model for a subject matter expert like you, mm-hmm. someone who has kind of deep reserves of knowledge and experience to share with a particular community or particular audience. The challenge is when you're actually moving, if it's something that you want to do, to subscription pricing, you want to think about who is it that you can best serve that way, who has ongoing challenges or a big goal that you can help them with forever. And then what kind of value could you layer in to maximize the likelihood of them achieving that forever goal? Yeah, and then you build your subscription that way.
Build it around that. All right, so let's tackle this term forever. That's kind of a long time. So when you're referencing it, which by the way is a great name, when you're referencing it, we're talking about a phased. I mean, people grow, they change, their needs adapt. Whatever it happens to be. So what is this forever transaction? What's a duration for you?
So the idea of it, and the reason I thought about it is, it means as long as your customer has that need, has that problem that they want solved every day, or has that goal that they're still trying to achieve, whether that's getting to a healthy lifestyle, right? If you're, let's say, a weight loss or a fitness program, or having the career I always dreamed of. Those are the kind of forever promises. Now, if I retire, I don't really need to worry about my forever career anymore.
Right.
Funny story that not many people know. Before the guys that started LinkedIn, before they started LinkedIn, they had a different company and it was called SocialNet. Still the same people with the same ideas about being intimate with their customers, using subscription pricing, focusing on the long term, building trust, but it was for dating. And dating has a very short runway. Right?
Yeah,
it's like 6 months tops.
Right. Yeah, right.
Right. And the last thing,
married, or they get tired of dating, or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
Yeah.
They find their soulmate. And once someone's found their soulmate, you don't want them in your dating pool anymore. Right. You don't want to bump up against them and say, wow, Art, you seem like a great guy. And Art says, yes, I am a great guy. And actually, I'm happily married. Like, you don't want that in your dating pool, right? You want it to be, and so what they realized was they had a great mindset. They totally had the forever mindset. They had the right culture for building trust and engagement and relationships, but their promise had a very finite duration. So they said, next time we start a company, we're going to pick something with a longer runway. And your career, right? I mean, my teenagers are on LinkedIn. My father, who had a great career and has been retired for 6 years, is also still active on LinkedIn because he does boards and he does other things. So, wow, from 18 to 77, that's pretty great. That is a much longer runway.
I think they nailed it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, subscription pricing has been around for a while. There are a lot of firms that do it. And frankly, there's a lot of vexing examples of it. Now, I confess to laughing out loud when I read the tweet from the individual who was trying to get out of his Sirius XM subscription, because I have been that guy. I have been that person.
Yeah. If there are any children listening,
Yeah. We don't have to repeat the word, but the tweet was hilarious. So, I mean, that's a firm. And frankly, I actually wrote them in a little bit more polite sense than that individual did. But I wrote them because I objected so strenuously to having to sign up for something, take advantage of a bargain price, and then the pricing would go up and I'd have to call them personally and go through a long ordeal just to cancel. That didn't seem like what you're after, even though they want me forever and they were trying to trap me forever. And I don't mean to pick on them, but they merited it in this case. Hope they're not a client of yours, by the way.
No, they should be. But, I think that what we're talking about here is first of all, there's a lot of subscription fatigue right now because everybody's doing subscriptions and consumers are much more aware of the difference between the right way of doing it and the wrong way. One of the biggest pieces of the wrong way and the reason that drives subscription fatigue is hiding the cancel button, metaphorically speaking. This includes requiring you to make a phone, you can sign up online, but if you want to cancel, you have to call. And by the way, you have to cancel Monday through Friday. And by the way, they're understaffed. Yeah. Right. That drives subscription fatigue. I think it's really unethical. And I actually think in the long term, it's bad for your business model because people like you and me who have those experiences then go and tell our friends, or worse, post on Twitter about our experience. And then other people are more cautious. The other thing is, I recently spoke at a subscription conference. I keynoted one day, and the woman who keynoted the next day, Leslie Fair from the FTC, was talking about bad actors in the subscription world and all the companies that her team has lawsuits against. And she said, and people in the room, it was really interesting, Art, because people in the room, they're all subscription practitioners. Right. They're asking questions like, what is the right font size for your disclosures? Or what is the right number of screens for somebody to go through? How many screens is too many for a cancel, a cancel stream? And she just said, guys, I am not trying to trick you. I am not trying to catch you because your font is a half a point too small. She said, I am looking for bad actors who deliberately try to confuse the customer or make it hard for them to cancel when they don't want something anymore. And I felt like that's kind of where we treat them. There's a great book Jeannie Bliss wrote called Would You Do That to Your Mother? And I think that's good advice that's a good bar for all of us.
For all of us. Yeah, no doubt about it. So I grew up in the software world, and initially it was the perpetual license model. We charged a big fee for the license and then an annual maintenance of 20%, and it was kind of what everybody did in the world. And then fast forward a number of years, I worked in a firm that did a subscription model. Two very different issues. I actually don't know that perpetual license firm could have made the shift to this. It seems like it's such a profound change in the way for organizations to do business. So, I mean, what's your, I know that's why you need to buy the book, but what's your experience with companies trying to make the change?
Yeah. So that's a big, as you kindly pointed out, that's a big part of this book. And,
yes.
And it's very different from the first book, because this was where I found a lot of my clients really struggling, where they said, okay, 5 years ago, they were like, I don't think we need subscriptions. And, I was trying to explain to them the value of recurring revenue. I don't need to do that anymore. But it's very hard for an organization that has grown up with lumpy transactional revenue to move to a model that uses subscription pricing, that focuses on the long term, that goes direct to the customer. All of those elements are very different, and it requires a different culture. And you talked about change management, and that's really what needs to happen. So, you start with a very, just to put this all in a nutshell, you start, if you're in a large organization that's already successful and you're experimenting with subscription, like you're an enterprise software company, and you're saying, maybe we should move to SaaS. The first thing you want to do is have a little team somewhere off in the corner figuring it out the way a startup would. And you want to give them a chance to figure out the model and give them some runway. And then once they've figured it out and people are they know who their ideal best customer is, they understand something about usage and lifetime value, and they've developed a product that actually is what the customers want. Because as you know, a SaaS product is built from the ground up very differently than an enterprise product.
No doubt about it.
And that's most subscription products. You just think about it differently. You can't take, this is like a word of caution, you can't take whatever products you happen to have lying around and bundle them together and say, now it's a subscription. Right. It's actually a different kind of product. So once you have all that, then you scale it. And one of the key elements is the cultural piece.
Always an issue. Yeah, it's almost a classic culture always eats strategy for lunch. Sometimes, however, strategy has to eat culture for breakfast. So I'm convinced of that.
What a cannibalistic community we have.
Yeah, no kidding. So and again, I did for everyone listening or watching, the book is filled with this in-depth wisdom. It really is a great manual on leading this type of strategic change. You also highlight some of the obstacles that firms run into. What are the biggest obstacles, or the one or two that you see that rear their heads most often?
For companies that are transitioning?
Yeah.
I would say that the cultural one is the biggest one. Which is often driven by the metrics and the focus of leadership. So if leadership is focused on quarterly revenue, you're never going to get into doing subscriptions, because, there's that moment where your revenue drops for subscription and, you make it up in the long term. So that's one thing, is you really need culture. There's some skill building that's involved, and there's a really very real fear in the organization that you're going to we were talking about cannibalization. Let's keep it up. There's a very real fear that the only customers who are going to transition from whatever you had before to your new subscription model are going to be your best customers. And and effectively what's going to happen is your best customer's lifetime is going to decrease, and you're not going to get any additional volume to expand or justify the move. So what I advise organizations to do is to get really clear on what the risks are and what the fears in the organization are, whether they're founded or unfounded. Make a list of them and just start knocking them off one by one.
Nice.
One of the biggest is cannibalization. You want to model that out. You want to experiment in some small way so that you understand how your best members change behavior and how your prospects, change their conversion rates. Those are the two things you need to know.
Okay, yeah, fabulous guidance. And I'm thinking back too, and although the days were kind of pre-SaaS in the software firm, I recall the dialogue when we discussed this pricing model with the CFO, and he got all bent out of shape and talked about revenue recognition issues and just wasn't going to go with that long drop off because he needed those quarterly numbers. So there was an example of culture rearing its head there. And at the time we chose not to die on that sword.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things that I've noticed that has kind of, wasn't something that I had ever thought about is that some of the best, most successful businesses at transitioning to subscription or membership are family-owned companies or closely held businesses. And the reason is leadership's not turning over, and leadership doesn't have short-term goals. Like the only thing that you care about if you're running a family business is it going to keep producing for the long term, for the whole, are we going to be able to take care of our family? They have a much longer runway, much longer ability to support a business than if I come in and I have 2 years or 18 months to prove to my board that I can hit my numbers or else I'm fired. I'm not going to mess with like subscriptions right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's not transition to that. That's a guaranteed signing your own release papers there. So, it's interesting that the chapter that stopped me in my tracks and what I want to delve into further, and the one that I think almost every organization will struggle with, not your chapter, but the topic is pricing. It's brutal. Yeah. That decision right there is horrifyingly complicated for most organizations to go from pricing one way to pricing another way. It's just, what's your counsel for them as they take that on?
Yeah. So some of the high level counsel that I would apply is that in subscription pricing, in a membership model, if you have a membership mindset, that is, you're focused on the long-term relationship with your customers and you want them to trust you and do what you tell them, your pricing needs to be easy for them to understand. So there's always a temptation to break down the pricing into a million little variables and kind of, put them through the algorithm and tell them at the other end, this is what you get to pay. When you do that, that means that the customer has to become an expert on your pricing to make sure they're being
not
charged fairly.
Right.
Not a good plan. So that's the first thing. So if you're going to go into the world of subscription, I encourage organizations to start with a single tier as opposed to multiple tiers.
Okay.
And you can kind of triangulate the value. There are different ways to figure out what's the right price point. One of them is, of course, you want to cover your own costs. Second thing is from a value perspective, which is you want to make sure that when a customer thinks about the value they're expecting from you, that the number seems like a reasonable amount to charge. And the third thing is competitive. If there are other offerings that are similar or that are perceived of as being similar, if you price differently from them, you need to have, I would call it, you need to have a really killer headline benefit. So in the world of subscriptions, you have headline benefits, which are the ones that get people to sign up, and you have engagement benefits, which are the ones that get people to stay. And you can't command a higher price without a really great headline benefit.
That's something that's actually true forever too. So, but great reminder there. So I'm curious now, you launched this book into a really challenging world where at the time of this recording, we're in the middle of the pandemic and stay-at-home orders and so forth. And you wrote the book before all of this happened. So what, if anything, has changed about your thinking or strengthened? What's your thinking today versus when you were writing this a year ago?
Yeah. So certainly not the launch I planned.
We're going to help cure that though.
Yeah. Thank you. So one thing that has been really interesting to me is, obviously I'm a big believer in subscription pricing and membership mindset. And I always say it's more resilient, predictable cash flow, blah, blah, blah. We have evidence now that it is more resilient. We hit a serious bump in the road. And, according to Zuora, which is one of the biggest subscription billing platforms, members of, people that are on their platform, companies on their platform have reported only 11% have membership declining in Q1 of 2020.
Wow.
So that means 89% of them are either flat or increasing their membership.
That's powerful.
So that's powerful. And then the other thing that I have learned, or I've been thinking about a lot lately, is that in a moment of great crisis, we're forced to reconsider our habits, which is actually a great opportunity for any kind of business, but especially subscription businesses, both with their existing members. So if I've been, let's say, a subscriber to a newspaper for years, and I like my print copy that lands, on my front porch every morning, and they keep trying to get me to look at online and I don't do it, guess what? If they don't deliver the paper anymore, I start going online. So it's forcing me to change behaviors, right? My mom is now streaming her yoga classes because she can't get to the studio. She's using, e-commerce to get her groceries. She's connecting with her book club over her Zoom subscription. So these are all new behaviors that were forced by coronavirus,
right,
by the pandemic. And what if you're a subscription business and you have this influx of new subscribers, which many of them do, the question is, how do you onboard? Onboarding becomes way more important because otherwise it's easy come, easy go. So how they came in for a very specific reason. I need this while I'm at home. But how do you build the relationships so that when things go back to normal, they say, this is part of my new normal. This is how I want to, like my mom said, I don't think I'm going to go to the studio anymore. I love doing yoga in my bathroom with my steam. She does Bikram and my heater. And, it's quiet. Nobody's flinging sweat on me.
There's no other germs. Right. Yeah.
Right. So she's actually changing, so I think to answer your question, the moment of crisis is actually a great opportunity for a lot of subscription businesses and other businesses to gain trial, and makes having a member mindset even more important. So not just thinking about getting that transaction, but how do I build the relationship so that they stay?
That guidance is so powerful. That's worth, 100 times the cost of the book, just right there. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So if you're able to, what are your favorite examples in your own life of membership and subscription situations?
So, my favorite subscriptions, number one is probably LinkedIn. As somebody who, works at home or works on an airplane or works in a hotel,
right.
That's really my community. So that's one example. And the way that they've continued to layer in value for professionals, it's the best example I have for all the different elements of building great memberships. How they started by, you can't get someone to join a community when nobody's there yet. So they started with, being a place to post your resume and manage your contacts. And then they've layered in value first for recruiters and salespeople, then for job seekers, and now for the rest of us. So there's a lot there that I find really interesting. Same issues, same kind of thing with Amazon, although these days they're so powerful that I worry a little bit about, a world where Amazon dominates truly everything that I buy. But from a subscription perspective and building a membership ecosystem, we could talk about them all day. There's a million details that all fit into best practices. So those would probably be two.
So, and I have to ask, you highlighted one that was fascinating in the book, and that was a dental care product.
Oh yeah. We Kellmans are prolific plaque producers, and so we really take our toothbrushes pretty seriously. My sister and my parents and I, like that. Not my husband.
That organization's going to get a bump in sales as your book grows.
Yeah, or I'll be.
I guarantee.
Yeah. Well, you can subscribe.
I'm looking it up now. I'm hoping you're getting a royalty.
I know I should be, but it's more than just. You can look at it as just I'm going to go buy a toothbrush because I need a toothbrush, or you could say, I'm building a relationship with an expert in oral hygiene. And that's going to help me take care of my teeth and my gums and my smile in whatever ways they can. There's so much more value than just the toothbrush or the toothpaste. It's the whole, learning about it, figuring out what works for in their case, the subscription we're talking about is how long you're brushing, where you're missing, when you need a new brush head and things like that. But the goal is, to take care of your teeth.
So
that's the forever promise.
Well, the reason I singled that one out was a lot of great examples, tremendous examples. You've obviously spent a lot of time with some name brand organizations working on this, but that particular example is the one that made me stop and really begin to think about all the different ways you could create value for customers.
Yeah.
That one can drive a lot of innovation, and certainly in how people think about subscription and membership. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. So you wrote The Membership Economy a number of years ago, and I enjoyed that as well. I think I received that book attending one of Alan Weiss's conferences where you were speaking. So I believe that was part of the program. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Alan has Oh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Alan has a great membership model. You asked about meaningful models. That's been a very meaningful one for me, bringing together solopreneurs and independent consultants to learn under his umbrella, learn from him, but also learn from each other in community. That's a really interesting model for, where he's one person. We're just talking about Oral-B or Amazon, which are so huge, but those same principles can apply to those of us who are practicing by ourselves.
Yeah, he's a force of nature in pulling that off, and one of my idols for sure. I haven't had the good fortune of being coached by him, but attending his conferences was close enough. So, so when you wrote The Membership Economy, and now we fast forward a couple of years to the Forever transaction, what did you learn along the way between the two? What did you learn that kind of led to this book?
So, the biggest thing is that the world changed around me. Mm-hmm. I wrote The Membership Economy in great part because I was getting tired of explaining what I was seeing and trying to convince people that it was a trend and a transformation that was affecting every industry. Mm-hmm. So I wrote Membership Economy to say, look, any business, any organization, big, small, public, private, old, young, not for profit, venture back, not venture back, public company, could benefit from taking a long-term view of their relationship with their customers, making that forever promise their North Star, and that would justify subscription pricing, which is the holy grail, which gets you higher valuations, yada, yada, yada. Everybody should do it.
Right.
And that's what the first book was, right? Go do it. This is why. 5 years later, I don't have to convince anybody that subscriptions are important, right? You're saying your marketing team's telling you to do it, right? Everybody knows, consumers know, consumers are asking companies, why don't you have a subscription? Or this is how your subscription should work. And the problem is organizations are struggling to execute. They're bumping up against these issues. How do I get started? How do I test? How do I scale? How do I bring the rest of the company along? How do I stay current? And that's really why I wrote this next book. And it's full of case studies of, a really broad range of organizations that have, done this well and kind of breaking apart what are the frameworks behind those decisions.
Yeah, it is so well done. It's kind of the follow-on how-to manual from the foundational thinking of the membership economy. So it's that missing how-to. So I'm curious, in kind of a winding things down here question. In my experience, every author learns something unique as they write a book. It's a non-trivial exercise to write a book. It can often be, as a wonderful friend of mine who's written 5 or 6. She always describes to me, Art, I love when it's done because while I'm doing it, it's a not-for-profit activity. It's but she always learns something, and I know I've done it twice. I've learned a lot. What did you learn by writing this book?
Oh man, a lot of things. I find that writing forces me to get clear on what I know and what I don't know.
Yes.
And then, once you're clear on what you don't know that you need to know, it's very easy to fill those gaps. The hard part is kind of wandering through the world, feeling unprepared, but not really being able to pinpoint what's stopping you or what's holding you back. So there were a million examples of that in writing this book and kind of, getting to the point where I'm like, oh, that's the question that I don't have the answer to, or that's the thing that I need. So I would say that's, and the other thing that I did that was really different with this book than with the first book is I was able to really get the book. I was more confident. So I actually got the book in front of a lot of clients and a lot of subject matter experts to get their feedback before I released the book, which which was a really rewarding process, and made me a lot more confident about the value that was in there, because people had seen it, people had tried using it without having me as their consultant, as an intermediary, to sort of say, does this really hold up if you don't have Robbie to kind of explain it and connect the dots? So that was something that I think I knew that intellectually. Like, people always say, go get your book out in front of people before you release it so that you can get real feedback. But I actually experienced that this time.
Oh, that's great. It's interesting. So, having been a fresh reader, I read it over the past couple of weeks here. It was both comfortable and confident. You've got a wonderful voice, and you weren't lecturing at us. You were helping us solve a problem along the way. So I loved it. Robbie Kellman Baxter, The Forever Transaction. It was wonderful to have you here. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more, other than finding your book on online booksellers of every type?
Yeah, they can find me at RobbieKellmanBaxter.com.
Okay.
They can find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot on LinkedIn, at LinkedIn Live, and I have 10 courses there. So that's a really good place to connect. And I'm happy to give your audience chapter 8 of the book.
Oh,
so
great.
I'll give you the link for that.
Okay.
But those are, you can, I would say I'm not hard to find.
Okay. And I'll include the links in the show notes here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this great how-to manual and all of your hard work. And I wish you nothing but the best with this book and future endeavors.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Art. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you. Same here.